As the month of February draws to a close, I shall conclude our Black History Month series with something of a personal hero of mine. But before I do, you might perhaps be wondering about this curious implement that I hold in my hands. This is, most fundamentally, a harpoon, a tool used in the whaling industry to make a length of line fast to a whale. But what makes this particular harpoon interesting and relevant to today's topic is the specific type of harpoon that it is. This is a toggle iron, invented by Lewis Temple in 1848. You will notice that the head here pivots, allowing the flue, as it is called, to sit at a 90-degree angle to the shank. When a whale is harpooned, its natural and very understandable instinct is to swim away as fast as possible, or to sound, sometimes diving to the astonishing depth of 1,000 fathoms. During this stage of the whale hunt, it is imperative that the harpoon does not slip or tear out of the whale, as this will result in the animal's escape and a tremendous loss of profit for the whaleman. It is here that the genius of the toggle iron becomes apparent. As the whale line comes under strain, the barb here catches in the whale's flesh, turning the head and preventing it from pulling free. Robert Burton offers a succinct explanation of the process in The Life and Death of Whales. To approach within harpooning distance, about 16 to 18 feet, the officer had to approach head-on, going on head-and-head, or from behind, going on the flukes, so that the whale did not see him. At the crucial moment, he pushed the long steering oar to swing bow onto the whale. The harpoon was darted, and a quick backstroke with the paddles lifted the boat clear. The harpooner had little time to take aim and dart, but the harpoon had to go in behind the head to avoid the skull, and, for preference, it had to enter the arched back. If the back were depressed when the harpoon struck, it was likely to be thrown out when the back arched and the wound enlarged. William Scoresby tells of a harpoon that was thrown clear into the air as the whale arched its back, but landed again point first and struck firmly into the whale, which, in due course, was captured. To hold firm, the harpoon had to penetrate the blubber, leaving its wooden pole behind, and fasten firmly into the underlying muscles. It was not unusual for a poorly thrown harpoon to draw, and often a second was thrown for extra security immediately after the first. An improved harpoon, the toggle iron, was invented by James Temple, a Negro blacksmith of New Bedford, in 1848. The single barb was mounted on a pivot and held closed by a stub of wood, which shattered as it entered the whale, allowing the barb to swing out. Now, Burton's description is materially correct, but he does make a few errors. Firstly, he is incorrect in the name of the man who is credited with inventing the toggle iron, as that was Lewis and not James Temple. His second error is one of omission, as it would be a great disservice to the Inuit, Yupik, and Aleut peoples of the circumpolar regions to ignore their important contribution to the toggle iron's design. These groups, you see, had been hunting whales, seals, and the like using a type of toggle-headed harpoon for centuries. Take a look at this painting of Greenland Inuits kidnapped by Dutch explorers in 1654. You will notice that the man holds a harpoon with a toggling head. Here is a slightly larger image of a similar harpoon. In The Life and Death of Whales, Clifford Ashley acknowledges this influence, and, to his credit, gets Lewis Temple's name right. With the entrance of American ships into the Kodiak grounds in 1835, American whalemen became acquainted with the walrus and seal spears of the Eskimos and the Indians of the Northwest. This spear had a detachable head, which pulled off the shaft after being darted and turned at right angles to the pull of the line. The principle of this spearhead made a convincing appeal to the whalemen, and upon their return home with specimens, practically every whalecraft maker in New Bedford turned to the problem of embodying this principle into an improved whale iron. The Eskimos of Greenland used similar spears, and there is evidence of much earlier attempts to fashion a whale iron that would toggle. Over 100 harpoon patent applications were filed in Washington within the next few years, some with removable heads, some with pivoted or toggling heads, and some with hinged barbs. A number of these harpoons promised well, but one in particular, invented by Lewis Temple, a Negro whalecraft maker of New Bedford in 1848, was of such extremely simple construction and was at the same time so practical that it was at once adopted to the exclusion of all others. With one slight change to permit easier manufacture, it has continued to be the standard harpoon of the fishery. The temple iron offered less resistance in entering the whale, and having toggled or turned at right angles under strain, it presented greater resistance against withdrawal than any other type of harpoon. To hold the head parallel with the shank until it had been driven through the blubber, there was a short wooden pin the size of a match. This pin broke the instant pull was exerted against the flue. Lewis Temple was a highly interesting character in his own right. Probably born into slavery in Richmond, Virginia, as a young man he was somehow able to make his way north, to the Massachusetts whaling town of New Bedford. There, he became a whalecraft maker, and perfected the toggle iron. He did not patent his invention, however, allowing it to be replicated and completely revolutionizing the American whale fishery. But Temple did not limit himself to blacksmithing. Due in part to the high proportion of Quakers living in New Bedford, the area was a hotbed of anti-slavery sentiment. Having experienced firsthand the horrors of slavery, Temple threw himself wholeheartedly into the movement. In 1834, he was elected vice president of the New Bedford Union Society, an abolitionist league. He would also become one of the auxiliaries to the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. Unfortunately, Temple's life would end under less than happy circumstances. While out walking one night, he fell into a hole that had been left negligently uncovered by city workers. Temple sued the city and won, but the money was not paid out until after he had already succumbed to his injuries. His widow used much of the settlement to pay off Temple's debts. Despite his sad end, Temple's invention lived on after him, remaining the favored harpoon of the Yankee whaler well into the 20th century. In recognition of his contribution to the whaling industry, a statue of Temple now stands in front of the New Bedford Public Library.